Derek Vale sold my invention for $450 million on a Tuesday morning, then introduced me as one of our legacy integration people. That was the moment I knew the sale was broken. Not because he insulted me. Men like Derek had been polishing their shoes on women like me for years. I was used to that. I was Mara Ellison, Director of IP Continuity and Clinical Systems Integration at Veradign Medical Systems. My job was not glamorous. I kept surgical robotics platforms from killing deals, missing safety gates, or collapsing under the weight of their own promises. In plain English, I made sure the machine worked before executives sold it. That morning, the glass conference room was packed so tightly the air felt thin. Board members sat along the long white table. Finance people stood near the back wall with tablets in their hands. A few younger employees from Derek's strategy team hovered by the screen, smiling like they had invented oxygen. I sat near the side wall with a paper cup of cold coffee balanced on my knee. My badge was still clipped to my blazer. My notebook was open. My pen was uncapped. On the screen behind Derek, in blue letters big enough to be seen from the hallway, were the words: Halden Cross Acquisition, 450M Technology Transfer. Under that was the name that made my stomach tighten. VX41 Adaptive Guidance Engine. My engine. My 7 years of ruined weekends, hospital trials, surgeon complaints, failed simulations, rewritten safety maps, and one very stubborn patent family. Derek stood at the front in a navy suit that looked more expensive than useful. He had that smooth executive smile people mistake for confidence until the first hard question lands. He thanked the board. He thanked Halden Cross Health System. He thanked his transformation team for turning old technical fragments into a market-ready asset. Then he turned slightly toward me, and of course people like Mara here helped preserve some of the legacy integration history. Some people laughed. Not loudly, just enough. That soft corporate laugh is worse than open cruelty. It gives cowards permission to pretend they did not hear anything sharp. Before I go further, remember this. When a company erases the person who built the thing they just sold, they are usually not just being cruel. They are usually being careless. And carelessness is where the best paper trails are born. Derek clicked to the next slide. As of this morning, Veradign has transferred full patent control of VX41 to Halden Cross as part of the exclusive global rights package. My pen stopped moving. Full patent control. Exclusive global rights. Those were not presentation words. Those were legal words. Dangerous ones. I looked at Celia Brandt, our general counsel, sitting 2 seats from the CFO. Her face did not change, but her right hand moved to the edge of her folder. That told me she had heard it too. Derek kept talking. He spoke about expansion, market capture, operating room automation, and the future of surgical precision. He used every phrase executives use when they want investors to hear growth and employees to hear goodbye. I barely heard the rest. Because I knew something Derek either did not know or had chosen not to understand. Veradign could use VX41. Veradign could build from it. Veradign could sell products that carried it inside their systems, but Veradign could not sell the patent family itself without one specific document. Form IPA 7. My countersigned assignment release, and I had never signed it. After the applause, Derek asked me to stay behind. The others filed out with their tablets and polite smiles. The conference room grew quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and the faint clicking of the screen cooling down. Derek closed the door. Mara, he said, using the voice people use when they have already decided you are furniture, with the Halden Cross team taking over integration, your role is no longer aligned with our future structure. He slid a white packet across the table. Severance. I looked at it, then at him. He seemed disappointed that I did not flinch. "We're moving past founder-era attachments," he added. That was his mistake. Not the firing, not even the insult. Founder-era attachments. He meant Alistair Wren. He meant the old agreement. He meant the documents he thought were ceremonial. I opened the packet. No patent exhibit, no IPA 7, no inventor release, no trust disclosure, nothing. The folder in my hands was not a termination packet anymore. It was proof they had sold something they did not fully own. So I stood, picked up my notebook, clipped my badge straight, and said, "Good luck with the transfer." Derek smiled like he had won. By the elevator, I looked back through the conference room glass. He was still inside, checking his phone, standing under the words "exclusive global rights." And for the first time that morning, I almost smiled. Because the transfer was defective. And nobody in that room knew it yet. I joined Veradyne when I was 41, which in tech years apparently meant I was old enough to be useful and too old to be exciting. Before that, I had spent 12 years at a major hospital robotics vendor, mostly cleaning up disasters created by men who spoke beautifully in demos and disappeared when the operating room asked hard questions. I learned early that the real work was never in the launch video. It was in the ugly middle. The failed test. The surgeon who said, "This arm is drifting." The nurse who noticed a delay nobody else saw. The engineer who swore the model was stable because the spreadsheet said so. I came to Veradyne because of Alistair Wren. Alistair was the founder, and unlike most founders, he knew the difference between invention and theater. He was quiet, awkward, and impossible to impress. During my interview, he did not ask where I saw myself in 5 years. He handed me a stack of failure reports and asked, "Can this be saved without lying to ourselves?" I said, "Yes," but not quickly. He hired me the next day. VX41 began as a problem nobody wanted to put on a slide. In long procedures, the robotic arms could drift out of sync with small patient movements. Not enough to make the machine useless, just enough to make a surgeon stop trusting it. And in an operating room, trust is not a branding issue. It is the whole product. I had been working on motion correction before Veradyne, on my own time and my own notes, because the problem bothered me. The body is not a table. It breathes. It shifts. It reacts. Machines like clean inputs. Patients do not provide them. So I built a method that let the system adjust in real time without overcorrecting. Then, I spent years making it safe enough for people who did not care how beautiful the math was. I sat with surgeons after midnight. I rewrote validation maps in airport lounges. I translated complaints like it feels a little late into data engineering could use. I wrote the early patent notes because no one else understood which part was new and which part was just expensive noise. Alistair understood. That was why he created my 2017 Innovation Continuity Agreement. The board wanted VX41 inside the company. Alistair agreed, but he also knew part of the invention existed before Veradyne ever paid me a salary. He said, "Mara, a company can love your work and still forget your name when money enters the room." He was right. After his stroke, everything changed. The board brought in Derek Vale as a growth operator. That was the phrase they used. Growth operator. It sounded clean. It really meant a man who could make bankers comfortable while cutting away anything that looked slow, careful, or human. Derek was young, polished, and always slightly bored by people who knew more than he did. He liked dashboards with green arrows. He liked one-page summaries. He liked staff who nodded before he finished speaking. He did not like me. I asked questions, not dramatic ones, necessary ones. Has clinical validation been completed for that use case? Did legal clear the assignment history? Does Halden Cross know which rights are operational and which rights are conditional? Every time I asked, Derek's smile got thinner. Once, during a leadership review, he said, "Mara has a gift for making progress feel like a hostage situation." The room laughed then, too. I wrote the line down. That was another thing Derek never understood about me. I documented everything. Not because I was paranoid. Because in serious companies, memory is weak, but records have teeth. By the time he sold VX41, Derek saw me as a relic. A woman from the founder era. A slow voice in the back of the room. Someone useful during development, but inconvenient during the victory lap. He thought the invention had outgrown me. What he did not understand was simple. VX41 had never been free of me. I drove home with the severance packet on the passenger seat like it was something alive. Outside my windshield, the city looked normal. People crossed streets with coffee. A delivery truck blocked a bike lane. Someone beside me laughed into a phone. That is the strange part about corporate betrayal. The building can shake under you, and outside traffic lights still change. I did not cry. I did not call a friend. I did not write a dramatic message to anyone at Veradyne. I went home, took off my blazer, and pulled a gray lockbox from the bottom shelf of my office closet. It was fire-resistant, heavy, and ugly. I had kept it since 2017, when Alistair Wren told me, "Keep your own copy, Mara. Companies forget what people once promised." Inside were the bones of VX41, patent sketches, lab notebooks, surgeon feedback forms with coffee stains, board minutes, email printouts, a binder with the blue Veradyne logo, and one agreement I had not opened in almost 2 years. 2017 Innovation Continuity Agreement. I turned to Exhibit C. The paper clicked softly under my fingers. I knew the language by heart, but I read it anyway. Slow, clean, like checking a lock before a storm. Patent Family VX41 Assignment Carve-Out. Veradyne had the right to use VX41 in its own products. It could develop from it, test it, package it, and commercialize it as part of company operations. That was fair. I had agreed to that. But there was one hard line. The company could not sell, transfer, sublicense, or include VX41 in any third-party acquisition package without my separate written counter-signature on Form IPA 7. Not an email, not a board vote, not a handshake. Form IPA 7. My signature. The reason was simple. Part of VX41 came from my work before Veradyne. I had brought the first motion correction method into the company. Alistair did not want a future board pretending the company had swallowed my independent rights just because I helped build the product. So he built a wall into the paperwork. If Veradyne tried to transfer those rights without my release, outside commercial rights reverted to the Ellison Inventor Trust. The company also had to notify the buyer and place disputed proceeds into escrow until the ownership chain was cured. In plain English, they could not sell my locked room and then act surprised when the buyer asked for the key. I opened Derek's severance packet again on my kitchen table. There was a release of employment claims. A confidentiality reminder, a non-disparagement paragraph written by someone who had never swallowed public humiliation with cold coffee in her hand. But there was no Form IPA 7, no inventor release, no transfer notice, no trust disclosure. I opened my laptop and found the public deal announcement. Halden Cross Health Systems acquires exclusive global rights to Veradyne's VX41 adaptive guidance platform. Exclusive global rights. I read that phrase 3 times. That was not an internal mistake anymore. That was a public statement to a buyer, hospitals, investors, insurers, and every lawyer paid to care about chain of title. For one quiet second, anger warmed my face. Not because they had fired me. A company can end a job. That happens. But they had sold the invention I carried through every dangerous stage, erased my name from the room, and acted like the paperwork would kneel because Derek wore a good suit. There was a wrong way to handle this. I could have posted screenshots. I could have called former coworkers and let the rumor travel faster than legal could breathe. That would have felt good for 10 minutes. Then Derek would have called me bitter, unstable. A former employee trying to damage a historic transaction. So I did what he should have feared most. I stayed quiet. I made a list. Proof of the sale terms. Proof of my rights. Proof that leadership knew the issue existed. Proof that they ignored it anyway. Because revenge, when done properly, does not begin with a scream. It begins with a file. The next morning, I woke before my alarm. For a moment, I forgot I had been fired. My hand moved toward my phone, ready to check overnight messages from engineers, hospitals, and validation teams. Then I remembered the white severance packet on my kitchen table. My company email was already dead. That made me laugh once. Somewhere inside Veradyne, someone thought cutting off my login was the same thing as cutting off my memory. I made coffee and opened my personal laptop. The first email I wrote was to Celia Brandt, Veradyne's general counsel. I kept it calm enough to be boring. Celia, please confirm that patent family VX41 was excluded from any third-party transfer unless Form IPA 7 was countersigned under the 2017 Innovation Continuity Agreement. I attached only the cover page, not Exhibit C, not the carve-out, not the reversion language. A quiet question is sometimes more dangerous than an accusation. An accusation gives people something to fight. A question forces them to choose between truth and a lie. Then I called Naomi Serrano. Naomi was the attorney who helped draft the original agreement. She had silver hair, a dry voice, and the rare legal habit of listening before speaking. When she answered, I said, Veradyne sold VX41. There was a pause. All of it? She asked. That's what Derek announced. Did you sign IPA 7? No. The silence on her end changed shape. Send me everything, she said. I scanned the agreement, board minutes, patent filing history, public announcement, and severance packet. What was missing mattered as much as what was inside it. Naomi called back 40 minutes later. Well, she said, they either found a signature you don't remember giving, or they have a $450 million hole in their deal. I remember every signature I gave that company. I assumed you would. That was the closest Naomi came to a compliment. She told me the strongest move was not a lawsuit. Not yet. The strongest move was a formal notice of conditional rights and demand for transfer verification. It would not accuse anyone of fraud. It would ask Veradyne and Halden Cross to verify the assignment chain and produce the countersigned IPA 7. If they had it, the matter ended. If they did not, the deal had to stop pretending it was clean. While Naomi drafted, I built the record. I saved the sale announcement as a PDF. I pulled the conference slide from a photo someone had posted on the internal celebration channel before my access died. I printed Derek's email from 4 weeks earlier, the one where I had asked whether legal had cleared the inventor carve-out. His reply was one sentence. Mara, stop protecting dusty founder paperwork and let the transaction team do its job. I placed that email on top of the pile. Then I wrote a timeline from memory. Every due diligence meeting, every warning, every question I asked, every time Derek cut me off because the answers slowed his victory lap. By noon, Naomi sent me the draft notice. It was beautiful in the way only dangerous legal writing can be beautiful. Plain, dry, polite, sharp enough to cut skin without raising its voice. It asked one question: please produce the countersigned form IPA 7 authorizing transfer of patent family VX41. I read it twice, then told Naomi to hold it until we had one more public statement from Derek. If he repeated the claim outside the conference room, it would be harder for Veridine to call the first slide a mistake. That afternoon, I put the severance packet, the agreement, and my notes into 3 folders. Employment. Patent. Notice. My name had been reduced to legacy integration. My invention had been sold like I was already dead. But the paper was lined up now. If Veridine could produce IPA 7, I was finished. If they could not, Derek had not sold VX41. He had sold a locked door. Veridine answered exactly the way I expected a frightened company to answer. Not with proof, with posture. Celia Brandt replied first. Her email arrived at 8:12 the next morning. It was short, polished, and careful in the way legal emails are careful when the sender is trying not to leave fingerprints. Mara, all inventions developed during employment are property of Veridine Medical Systems. Please direct future questions related to your separation through the severance process. That was it. No mention of Exhibit C. No mention of IPA 7. No mention of the Ellison Inventor Trust. Just a smooth corporate blanket thrown over a fire. I forwarded it to Naomi and wrote, "She didn't answer." Naomi replied, "No." She very much did. She was right. A person with a clean transfer says, "Attached is the signed release." A person without one says, "Please direct future questions through severance." Derek, of course, could not leave it there. By lunch, a former colleague sent me a screenshot from a senior staff email. I did not ask for it. I did not want anyone risking their job for me. But people who build real systems usually know who actually held them together. They remember Derek had written, "A former employee is attempting to interfere with our historic Halden Cross transaction. Please do not engage with outside questions regarding VX41. The company's ownership position is complete and secure." I stared at the words "former employee" for a long time. Not inventor, not director, not the woman whose name appeared on every serious validation map. Former employee. That was the second gift Derek gave me. The first was selling VX41 without my signature. The second was turning a rights question into a retaliation record. Inside Veridine, he began moving fast. That was his style. When he did not understand a problem, he tried to outrun it with confidence. He assigned the VX41 transition to Blake Niven, his favorite product director. Blake was 30, handsome in a recruiting brochure way, and always carried a tablet even when the answer was on paper. He had never managed clinical integration. He had never sat in an operating room while a surgeon lost trust in a machine. But he knew how to say scalable pathway without blinking, which made Derek feel safe. Blake's first move was to clean the buyer data room. That phrase came back to me through another quiet channel. Clean the data room. In corporate language, clean sounds responsible. It means organized, clear, professional, but sometimes clean means removing anything that might make powerful people uncomfortable. Blake pulled my validation notes because they were too cautious. He removed my continuity map because it had too many red flags. He renamed the folder that held my assignment history from Conditional Rights Review to Legacy Inventor File. That small change mattered. Names matter in companies. A risk called conditional rights gets attention. A file called Legacy Inventor gets ignored by busy executives who think history is clutter. Derek was not stupid. That is important. Stupid men are easy to beat and not very interesting. Derek was worse. He was shallow in a highly paid way. He could see just far enough to know a document might slow him down, but not far enough to understand why it existed. 2 days later, he hosted a second investor briefing. I watched the replay once from my kitchen table with Naomi on speaker. Derek stood in front of a cleaner slide deck this time. No messy detail, no conditional language, no founder-era attachments. He smiled into the camera and said, Halden Cross now holds exclusive global control of the VX41 technology package, and integration is already underway. Naomi made a small sound, not a gasp. Naomi did not gasp, more like a door locking. That's enough, she said. I paused the video on Derek's face. He looked pleased with himself, relaxed, untouched. Send the notice? I asked. Almost, Naomi said. Let's see if the buyer steps into the room first. The buyer stepped in the next morning. At 9:43, an email appeared in my personal inbox from Dr. Lena Moritz at Halden Cross Health Systems. I had worked with Lena during early clinical trials. She was sharp, direct, and allergic to nonsense. Her message was polite, but I could feel the tension under it. Mara, we're reviewing the VX41 continuity map, and your name appears on every clinical safety dependency. Can you clarify whether you remain the transition authority for validation sign-off? I sat still for a moment. There it was. The name Derek tried to erase, sitting in the buyer's own dependency map like a pin in the wall. I wanted to answer Lena fully. I wanted to protect the hospitals, the surgeons, the nurses, the patients who would never know my name but would live under the results of that system. But I was no longer Veradyne's employee. I would not let Derek turn my professionalism into free labor while he called me interference. So I wrote one sentence. Dr. Moritz, please direct questions regarding VX41 assignment authority and continuity rights to Veradyne Legal, as my role was terminated before transfer verification was completed. I read it 3 times. Then I sent. Within 2 hours, Halden Cross Legal was copied onto the chain. By 4 o'clock, Celia Brandt had sent me no fewer than 3 emails asking that I preserve all communications and refrain from contacting buyer personnel directly. I almost laughed. I had not contacted the buyer. The buyer had contacted the name they found buried in the system. Derek wanted me gone so badly that he forgot to remove me from the one place that mattered. The work itself, Naomi sent the formal notice the next morning at 7:58. Not 8 o'clock, not after coffee. 2 minutes before the hour, clean enough to land in every inbox before the first executive meeting began. The subject line was plain. Notice of conditional rights and demand for transfer verification, patent family VX41. It went to Veradyne Legal, Halden Cross Counsel, the escrow agent, and the board's transaction committee. I was copied, but I did not reply. I just watched the email arrive and felt the room change from 30 miles away. The notice did not shout. It did not accuse Derek of theft. It did not call anyone a liar. It did not use the word revenge, because serious documents do not need dramatic words when the facts are strong enough. It asked one question. Please produce the countersigned Form IPA 7 authorizing the sale, transfer, sublicence, or inclusion of patent family VX41 in the Halden Cross transaction. Then it explained the consequence in clean language. If no signed IPA 7 existed, external commercial rights were unresolved. Buyer disclosure was required. Proceeds tied to VX41 had to remain in escrow until the assignment chain was cured. In simple terms, Varadyne had to show the key or stop pretending the door was open. The reaction was immediate. At 8:26, Halden Cross paused the second payment tranche. That number mattered. The first payment had already moved. The second was tied to confirmed transfer of rights and integration readiness. Without that payment, Varadyne's finance team had a problem. Not a small problem. A board-level problem. At 8:41, Halden Cross Counsel requested the full assignment chain for VX41. At 9:03, Celia Brandt asked Varadyne's transaction team for the executed IPA 7. At 9:17, someone in that team replied, "We are locating." People say we are locating when they do not have the thing. I learned that phrase years ago. By noon, the celebration banners in Varadyne's lobby were still up, but the mood had changed. A friend in compliance told me people had stopped taking selfies near the Halden Cross display. Finance locked itself in a conference room. Legal pulled the deal room access logs. The board secretary started moving calendars around with the speed of someone being yelled at by more than one rich person. Derek tried to hold the line. He told people the employment agreement covered all company inventions. That sounded reasonable to anyone who had not read Exhibit C. But Celia had read it. Maybe not recently. Maybe not carefully enough before the sale. But now she knew exactly what it said. The carve-out defeated the general employment language. A broad company policy is strong until it runs into a specific signed exception. And mine had Alistair Wren's initials on every page. Then the operational cracks started. 3 hospitals waiting for VX41 upgrades asked whether the technology was fully cleared for transfer. A major insurer delayed a reimbursement review because ownership of the underlying platform was now in question. Halden Cross paused its integration schedule until Varadyne could prove it had delivered what it promised. The sales team was given talking points. That was another bad sign. Talking points are what companies use when truth is either too complicated or too ugly. The first version said, "There is no material issue with the VX41 transaction." The revised version said, "The company is reviewing routine inventor documentation." By the third version, the words routine and documentation had disappeared. Clients notice that sort of thing. They may not know the legal issue, but they can smell fear in revised language. Meanwhile, I said nothing. That was the part Derek could not understand. He expected anger. He expected me to call, accuse, threaten, maybe give him something he could forward to the board with a note saying, "See, this is personal." I gave him nothing. No social media post. No emotional email. No late-night voicemail. Just documents. A timeline. A missing signature. And a notice asking for one form they could not produce. By late afternoon, the board called an emergency meeting for the following day. Halden Cross demanded that Varadyne either cure the assignment defect or restructure the asset package. The escrow agent confirmed that disputed proceeds linked to VX41 would remain frozen until the rights question was resolved. That was when the money became real. Not pride, not office politics, not whether Derek liked me. Money. $450 million had slowed down because one woman he dismissed as legacy integration still controlled the line his lawyers forgot to check. That evening, Naomi called me. "They're going to ask what you want," she said. I looked at the 3 folders on my table. Employment. Patent notice. Then I looked at the blank line on Form IPA 7 where my signature should have been. "No," I said. "First they're going to ask how bad it is." The emergency board meeting started at 10:00 the next morning. I did not go to Veradine. Naomi had advised against it. Let them sit in the room they made, she said. You don't need to walk into their building to prove you own your own signature. So I sat in Naomi Serrano's office with a glass of water, a yellow legal pad, and the original agreement inside a folder on the table between us. Her office was small, quiet, and far less impressive than Veradine's glass boardroom. But it had one advantage. Every document in that room was real. The video call opened with 12 faces on screen. Veradine's board, Celia Brandt, Derek Vale, Blake Niven, 2 Halden Cross lawyers, the escrow agent, a transaction advisor who looked like he had not slept. Derek looked polished, but not rested. That was the first time I saw the crack in him. He started before anyone asked him to. With respect, he said, this is being inflated by a former employee who is unhappy with a restructuring decision. Naomi did not move. She had the stillness of a person who knows the other side has started badly. One of the board members, Samuel Keene, said, Derek, let counsel proceed. Derek's jaw tightened. Naomi shared her screen. No drama, no raised voice, just the timeline. First, my pre-company research notes. Dated, signed, witnessed. Then the 2017 Innovation Continuity Agreement. Then, Exhibit C. Then, the line that required Form IPA 7 before any sale, transfer, sublicense, or acquisition bundle involving patent family VX41. Then, the Halden Cross press release claiming exclusive global rights. Then, Derek's conference slide. Then, Derek's investor briefing. Then, the missing signature page. She let that last document sit on screen. A blank line can be louder than a speech when $450 million is waiting behind it. Derek leaned forward. Again, the broader employment agreement assigns inventions to the company. Naomi nodded. General language does not erase a later specific carve-out signed by the founder, the company, and Miss Ellison. Celia closed her eyes for half a second. That was when I knew legal had stopped defending Derek and started defending the company from him. One of the Halden Cross lawyers spoke next. Her name was Priya Shah, and her voice was calm enough to make the room colder. Did Veradine represent that it had exclusive global transfer authority over VX41? Celia looked down at her notes. Yes, she said. Was Form IPA 7 included in the assignment chain delivered to Halden Cross? No. Does Veradine have a countersigned Form IPA 7 from Miss Ellison? The silence after that question was the kind that makes people notice the air conditioning. Celia said, Not at this time, not at this time. I almost admired it. Legal language has a way of putting a nice coat on a body. Then Blake made it worse. He was trying to help Derek. I could see it in his face. He wanted to sound useful, clean, modern. The kind of person Derek promoted because he made problems look simple. We did see an inventor folder, Blake said, but it looked like legacy documentation. Derek wanted the data room clean for the buyer, so he moved older validation material out of the active review set. Priya Shah looked up sharply. You removed validation material from the buyer data room? Blake blinked. Derek cut in. That's not what he meant. But it was too late. Everyone had heard the word. Clean. That one little word did more damage than any insult Derek had ever thrown at me. Because it told the board exactly what had happened. They had not missed the risk because it was invisible. They had cleaned around it. Samuel Keene turned to me for the first time. Miss Ellison, he said, did you ever object to the Halden Cross transaction? I looked at the screen. Derek was staring at me now. Not with boredom, not with that thin smile, with need. No, I said. I never opposed the sale. I opposed selling rights the company had not secured. Nobody spoke, so I added nothing. That was a lesson I had learned in operating rooms and boardrooms alike. When the correct sentence lands, do not bury it under more words. The board moved into executive session. Naomi and I were placed in a virtual waiting room. The screen turned gray, and for 11 minutes, all I could see was my own reflection. I looked tired. I also looked very calm. When they returned, Samuel Keene read from a prepared note. Effective immediately, Mr. Vale's authority over the Halden Cross transaction is suspended pending internal review. Varadyne will engage directly with counsel for the Ellison Inventor Trust to resolve the assignment defect. The escrow hold remains in place. Derek's face did not change much. Only his eyes did. They moved from Samuel to Celia to Blake, then finally to me. For the first time since I had known him, Derek Vale had nothing to sell. Priya Shah from Halden Cross leaned toward her camera. "Miss Serrano," she said, "we need to understand what terms would cure the defect." Naomi glanced at me. I looked down at the folder on the table. The original agreement was still there. So was Form IPA 7, with the empty signature line Derek had assumed was a detail. I finally understood the full shape of what he had done. He had not just fired me, he had turned me into the only door left open. The first offer came that afternoon. It was insulting, which meant Varadyne still had not learned. They offered to reinstate me for 6 months as a transition advisor, pay my original salary, add a modest bonus, and have me sign Form IPA 7 as part of a mutual business resolution. Naomi read it out loud, then looked at me over her glasses. I said no. Not loudly, not dramatically, just no. I had already been their employee. I knew what that was worth to them. They wanted my signature at a discount because they still thought of me as someone they could manage. But I was not negotiating as a fired director anymore. I was negotiating through the Ellison Inventor Trust. That changed the room. The revised structure took 9 days. Halden Cross did not want a lawsuit. Varadyne did not want the second payment tranche frozen into the next quarter. The board did not want investor calls filled with phrases like defective assignment chain and unresolved patent transfer. So the deal changed. The Ellison Inventor Trust granted Halden Cross a clean external license to VX41. Not Varadyne, not Derek, my trust. The terms were simple enough for everyone to understand. A cure payment from the frozen proceeds. Ongoing royalty participation tied to VX41 revenue. A public correction naming me as original inventor and continuity architect. Clinical transition protections that could not be removed by a product director chasing a cleaner slide deck. And a consulting agreement that gave me final authority over validation safety during the handoff. Not advisory authority. Final authority. Varadyne's board approved it because they had no better option. Halden Cross accepted it because they wanted the technology more than they wanted Derek's pride. Celia Brandt survived because once the documents surfaced, she stopped pretending. Blake Niven was moved to a role with fewer sharp objects. Derek left 6 weeks later under what the announcement called a governance transition. Corporate language is beautiful that way. It can make a public defeat sound like a calendar update. I returned to Varadyne only once. Not for closure. I do not believe buildings give closure. People do, and only when they tell the truth. I went back to sign the corrected license package. The marble lobby looked exactly the same. Same tall windows, same pale stone. Same security desk where I had scanned my badge for years before sunrise, while executives were still asleep in houses paid for by products people like me kept alive. I reached for my old badge by habit. It did not work. The guard looked embarrassed. "Sorry, Miss Ellison, you're listed as external." "That's correct," I said. He printed a visitor pass. Under my name, in small black letters, it said, Ellison Inventor Trust. I clipped it to my blazer and walked past the elevators. People noticed. Some looked away. Some smiled carefully. A few gave me the small nod people give when they cannot say, "You were right," because their jobs are still inside the building. The boardroom was waiting. So were Samuel Keene, Celia Brandt, 2 Halden Cross lawyers, Naomi, and 3 copies of the corrected license package. Derek was not there. His absence was the first honest thing Veyradine had given me. I sat at the same long table where he had called me legacy integration. The same table where he had slid me a severance packet and told me the company was moving past founder-era attachments. This time, nobody laughed. Naomi placed the signature page in front of me. Form IPA 7 was not part of it anymore. That was the point. They could not buy the assignment they had pretended to own. They could only license the rights under terms I controlled. I took out my own pen, not a company pen, not one from the boardroom tray. Mine. I signed the trust license slowly, Mara Ellison, trustee. Then I closed the folder and slid 1 copy to Halden Cross. There, I said, now the transfer is clean. No one thanked me. I did not need them to. I walked out through the marble lobby with the visitor pass still clipped to my blazer, carrying my copy of the agreement in one hand and the invention they thought they had already sold in the other. Derek had wanted me erased from the deal. Instead, my signature became the deal. If you've ever been treated like a footnote by people standing on your work, remember this story. And stay close for the next one, because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding the clause that changes everything.